Hello, my dear friends. How are you doing? Hope you are having an amazing day and not having to deal with drama. Ready for new stories I have for you today? Let's go to the first one. And don't forget to listen to the end of the story, guys, to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. I, 26 female, am in a long-term committed relationship with another woman, 23 female. Both of us have always known that we wanted children, and we've had a lot of discussions about just how that might happen. My brother, Roy, 34 male, cheated on his wife, 32 female, with a younger woman, Mary, 21 female. He had been carrying on an affair with her for about 2 years. Mary says that nothing started until after she was 18, for what it's worth. However, all of this came to light when she got pregnant and came to our family. Roy wanted her to terminate, but she wasn't comfortable with that, and he convinced her to go with adoption instead. Obviously, this caused major trouble in his marriage. Our family all came to know about Mary, and my partner and I actually ended up offering her a lot of support. We genuinely became friends with her as well. Mary's not in a position to be raising a child, and she's not really interested in motherhood. However, my partner has a little bit of baby fever, and she asked if we could be the ones to adopt Mary's kid. Our state actually makes private adoptions pretty straightforward, so we made the arrangements through an attorney. Mary was happy about this, and we told her that we'd be glad to have her in the baby's life as it fits her ability to be around. Mary gave birth to our beautiful daughter, Sabrina, and Sabrina has been living with my partner and I ever since. Legally, I'm her mother. My parents have been thrilled about this because they love the idea of having their grandkid around. They've been a great help and are constantly helping us look after our daughter. Roy, however, is severely unhappy about this, to say the least. He didn't want us to adopt Sabrina, and he says that her being around at family functions and in everyone's lives so much is upsetting to his wife. They've reconciled, more or less, and she's kind of stuck with him. She's been his stay-at-home partner since she was 20, and there are reasons why divorce might not go well for her. But he says that Sabrina is a constant sore point. Both Roy and his wife are resolutely child-free, and his wife had literally threatened to divorce him if he attempted to gain custody over Sabrina. Roy says that there were a million other ways that my partner or I could have gotten a baby, and that it was selfish and a-hole-ish to force his mistress's baby back into his life after he was trying to repair things. He's repeatedly pointed out that my partner still thinks she might want to get pregnant at some point soon, and the fact that I haven't denied that I might be pregnant someday, as reasons why we should have let Sabrina go to some other family, where she won't automatically cause trouble. He is also not only upset about Sabrina being in the family, but about Mary being around too. He really hates her, because he feels like she tried to baby trap him. This couldn't be further from the truth, as she never wanted to keep the baby one way or another. As to how she got pregnant, they were using condoms, and he thought she was also on birth control. Mary has admitted that she lied about being on birth control because she didn't like the side effects, and he was using condoms anyway. She admits this was dumb. She's pretty sure she got pregnant when Roy kind of got lazy, impatient, and used the same condom for a second round. Roy is absolutely furious at her and thinks that she did it on purpose, but she didn't. And besides that, she was like 19 or something, and obviously not the one at fault here. He's upset about the fact that we didn't plan on keeping his paternity a secret when Sabrina is old enough to ask questions, and he has repeatedly said that his problem was solved, and we unsolved it. Roy used to be our parents' favorite. He has a very prestigious, very high-paying job. He's their firstborn son, and until they accepted that he and his wife were truly serious about being child-free, they figured he was their best chance at grandkids. I, on the other hand, was always kind of the family weirdo, and my parents never really understood my personality. And while they haven't been homophobic or anything, I sometimes got the vibe that they were a little disappointed I was mostly dating women and settled down with another woman, and that they might have been hoping my sexuality was just a phase and that I'd eventually settle down with a man. Now, however, Roy has gotten tons of flack from them, and they've been practically showering my partner and me with love and support. He is clearly very, very jealous. Roy has said that I brought Sabrina into a messed up family situation and that I should have let her have a chance at going to a normal household. And he has come dangerously close to implying that it's wrong of me to be raising her in a non-married, semi-open relationship between two women rather than in a traditional married heterosexual household. I've told him that he can shove his implications, and that any part of this that's a problem for him is his own damn fault. Everyone loves Sabrina, and as far as I'm concerned, if that causes problems for Roy and his wife, then that's on them. Some of my friends, acquaintances, have expressed limited sympathy for Roy and said that they can understand how I'm messing up his life though, but I disagree. The affair happened, and I don't feel like he should be relying on his wife forgetting about it just by keeping it out of sight and out of mind, like she's a goldfish or something. Am I the a-hole for adopting my brother's affair daughter? Just a small edit so I don't have to repeat myself in the comments for things that people have asked. People have asked if Roy could stop the adoption. Technically, sort of, but actually no. If Roy tried to block the adoption from going through, then Mary could also back out, and that would just mean that she keeps the baby. That would mean that Roy pays her child support, and it would also mean that our parents would have completely disowned him, probably had Mary move in with them, and that our aunts and uncles and entire extended family would have gone completely nuclear, tearing his life apart. He never had the ability to try to block exactly one person from being able to adopt without also giving Mary the ability to call the whole thing off and accept that she's forced to keep the baby. He never had the option to get what he wanted, which would be for Sabrina to just disappear. Roy really didn't have any choice about whether or not the adoption went through. Not unless he wanted to pay Mary child support and still have Sabrina around anyway. Probably even more. I've never been close with Roy's wife. I've always just been Roy's annoying little sister to her, and she's always been Roy's wife to me. When I was a kid, she seemed to think I was a pest, and even since I've been an adult, she's always been pretty clear that she doesn't like my fashion, or my politics, or my lifestyle. We've never had any kind of feud or drama, but we've also never done more than exchange pleasantries and small talk at family gatherings. It's not like we talked much before, so it would have been weird to start talking to her now. For as much as she says that she cares about traditional values, and as much as she's criticized the concept of open relationships, she's also been unfaithful to Roy before. I asked my mom, and she confirmed that Roy spotted her nudes on his former friend's phone years ago, and my mom also told me that Roy confirmed his wife and the friend did meet up physically together. She didn't want to go into Roy's business any more than that, and I didn't want to pry anymore. She and Roy do have a prenup, and while I don't know the terms or everything that goes on in their marriage, people have implied that a divorce might not go well for her. Also, to clarify, Mary is not constantly around or there at every family function or anything like that. My partner and I are friends with her, and she's at our place, sometimes, and she's at our parents' even rarer than that. She doesn't come to every gathering or hang around constantly at all, even though me and my parents have told her that she's obviously welcome. She's Sabrina's bio mom, and we want her to have a good relationship with her and for Sabrina to have the chance to know her. Regarding telling Sabrina that Roy is her bio dad, that's not really much of a choice. We want her to know that we are her bio family, and we want her to know that her grandparents are her blood grandparents. Unless we told her a giant lie and pretended that none of us were related to her, there would be absolutely no way to hide the fact that Roy is her bio father. Our parents only have one son. We don't plan to super highlight the fact or anything, but Sabrina won't have to be too old before it would be completely obvious. We don't want to lie to her. Finally, my partner and I are over the moon to be parents and madly in love with Sabrina. I can't imagine that sending her away from two loving parents and a whole bio family that deeply loves and wants her would be justified by the idea that she might sometimes have to talk to her a-hole dad, or that she might sometimes see Roy's wife make her little angry scrunchy face. Her grandparents love her, my aunts and uncles love her, and both of her moms absolutely love her. She has a safe and secure home, and none of us would want to see her thrown out into the unknown. OP's brother is mad that his affair has real-life consequences, and he's throwing a tantrum because he can't just sweep it all under the rug. He cheated. He got his mistress pregnant. She pushed for adoption. OP stepped up and gave that child a loving home. He doesn't get to act like OP unsolved his problem. He created this mess, and he's just salty that the family isn't letting him pretend it never happened. If anything, OP did him a favor by keeping baby in the family, instead of her growing up to hate him for abandoning her. And now let's hear the community's opinion. Oh my God, Roy is throwing a fit because his wife is still mad at him, and instead of taking responsibility for what he did, he's trying to blame you for existing? That's wild. You didn't ruin his life. He did that by himself. Maybe he should focus on fixing his relationship instead of whining that you dared to give a baby a loving home. And I love how he's suddenly a traditional values guy, now that it's convenient, even though his wife literally cheated on him too. Messy, messy, messy. Honestly, this is just a classic case of actions having consequences. Roy had an affair, got someone pregnant, and now has to live with the reality that his kid exists. If he and his wife are so fragile that simply seeing the child he fathered is threatening their marriage, then maybe they should have never reconciled in the first place. You and your partner are providing a stable, loving home for Sabrina, and that's what truly matters. Roy and his wife need to work on their issues instead of expecting you to cater to their feelings. So let me get this straight. Roy cheats, knocks up a 19-year-old, pushes her to give up the baby, and now he's mad that you adopted her because he wants to pretend she doesn't exist? On top of that, his wife, who cheated on him too, is upset because his mistress's baby is around. And he's the one talking about a normal household, when he and his wife are in a barely holding it together disaster of a marriage. The irony is killing me. Not the a-hole OP, but Roy and his wife sure are. Last week, my cards started getting declined, and my dear husband, who has generally managed all the finances, confessed that he had loaned his deadbeat sister $40K. He had overdrawn all our accounts, hadn't consulted me about it, and we had to move into crisis mode and borrow money from family to get solvent. In theory, his sister is selling her house and will pay us back in full with some of the equity this summer. I've spent a week agonizing over budgeting and trying to find ways to come up with money for our kid's birthday in a few months. Tonight, I asked him to log into our bank account so I could check our spending from last month, and he got squirrely about it, but it was kids' bedtime, so I had to wait. I came down from getting the kids to bed, and he had written down the payment info I was looking for on a piece of paper instead of letting me see the screen. That's when I knew something was wrong. I handed him the laptop to log in, and that's when he confessed that he had been having an emotional affair. He said that late 2016 he had gone to a strip club a few times and met a stripper who had claimed to be having a hard time. They exchanged numbers and started texting. He's deleted all the texts, so I have no way of knowing exactly what they said. She started asking for money, always with a sob story, so he paid her, and then just kept paying. They never had a physical affair, but he says he loved her, and she said she loved him. He never had any intentions of leaving me, and we've been poly before, so I wouldn't have been opposed to him having a girlfriend if he'd done it right. His sister had begged him for money last month. It was only $20K. He fudged the numbers hoping to cover up the affair, and he drained our accounts to pay them. His sister, the affair. When his affair texted again begging for money and he said no, she said she would tell me about their affair if he didn't pay, and included details like my name and our address, so she's looked us up. So he used the borrowed money to pay her off. I took a few minutes to add up all the payments, and it's over $60,000 in about 14 months. He even did an early withdrawal from his retirement account to pay her. I'm completely blindsided by this and have no idea how to even start processing any of it. He is incredibly apologetic and feels terrible about it, but I'm so horrified by the year plus of sneaking around and the complete lack of financial responsibility. I'm obviously hurt by the affair too, but I'm trying to keep this strictly on the "oh crap, how do we get through this financially" aspect. I don't know how to set boundaries around finances to protect myself, my kids, from him spending the money we've been able to borrow. We got another loan putting us at about $10K, but there is still some card debt to pay off. So far, he's given me all his credit debit cards, and I've changed the passwords on all our billing accounts so I can manage billing and he won't have access. I'll give him cash as needed for gas. I do all the grocery household shopping. Obviously, I need to start taking a more active role in managing our finances and checking all our statements each month. I know that we could report his ex for extortion, but that wouldn't get our money back. However, if she tries to ask him for money again, he will let her know that he no longer has access to any money because I found out about her and that there's nothing he can do. Would it make sense for him to get paper records from our phone company of the text messages so that we have evidence of extortion if she won't stop harassing him. He paid her as recently as January 31st. So I have no idea how long it will take her to give up. Is there anything else I'm missing? Are there any relationship boundaries I should be setting, or things he should do to help me trust that his affair is over? He did not shell out $60,000 for text messages. There's more to the story, and you ought to get tested. Assume everything he said is a lie. He lied to you for a year and you couldn't tell, so there's no reason to think you can now. He needs to get a second job to repay what he stole from your family. That also gives him less time to hang out with strippers. And no more strip clubs, ever. He's not strong enough to resist temptation. It's literally a stripper's job to get men to part with their money, which he did, happily. Your husband is not an innocent victim. He did this willingly. Thanks for the comment. He says that she would tell him that she was going to be evicted or needed money for medical bills because she got pneumonia, or that the person she was living with was R-ing her and she needed to get out immediately. Obviously, since he's deleted the messages, I have no way to know. He also claims that he didn't keep track of how much he was spending, so I don't know that he knew how bad it had gotten. But I guess I'm making a lot of excuses for him. He does have a second job now, and unfortunately, our schedule doesn't really have room for a third. So we're just going to have to go the slow and steady savings route. His primary job makes good money, but it will still be years before we can fully pay back our family loans and get back to having decent savings, let alone doing vacations or home repairs. No strip clubs is a really good boundary that I hadn't thought to explicitly mention. I know, when he said that he had met her at a strip club and she said she was having a hard time, I replied, "And you bought that line?" That's such a cliche. I will be getting tested and asking him to as well. He gave 60 grand to a stripper without any S involved? For years he lied, he cheated, he ruined your family financially. He risked you and your children's safety. I could never ever trust this man again. Focus on protecting you and your children's financial safety. And if it was me, he'd already get served divorce papers yesterday. When he was telling me about it, he looked genuinely distraught about her living conditions, and I know how compassionate he is. I can see him trying to help somebody out, and it's snowballing and him panicking about it. He said that every time it was supposed to be the last time she needed money, but he didn't feel like he could let her stay in a dangerous situation. I guess it feels less like a lie and more like a lie of omission. I never asked about finances beyond a general, "How is our savings looking?" or "Can we make plans for X trip, project, whatever?" And I never asked if he was cheating, so he never directly lied. I am angry that he's been trickle-truthing, and I honestly don't know if I'll ever be able to trust him again. I can't imagine keeping something like this from him for a week, let alone a year. My mother passed away very suddenly in a terrible accident in December 2018. I was living abroad at the time, had been for 6 years, and when I got the call, I came home immediately. I left my job, apartment, long-term partner, and all my earthly possessions behind. I bought a one-way ticket to be with my dad as long as he needed. He was in the accident as well and suffered intense physical and mental trauma. I'll spare the gory details, but he watched my mom die in his arms. He was left incapable of walking and using his hands for weeks, obviously unable to work. I stayed with him the whole time, and myself and my sister took care of all my mother's affairs. All of us were devastated. My mom was the center of our family and was immensely loved by our entire community, city. I lived with my dad and cooked, cleaned, and took care of all the paperwork and bills. After about 6 months, my dad had made good progress, and I was able to move out of his house and start living my own life again, albeit back in a country I had left so long ago to remain close enough to him should he need anything. With how traumatic the whole ordeal had been, myself and our entire community of friends were elated to see that he was mostly coping on his own. He was back to working part-time again and was attending therapy. We had a celebration of my mother's life at this point. There was no funeral in the first instance, as my dad was finally well enough to take part. We still have her cremation remains, as we were planning on taking them to her favorite place to spread them, our cottage. We decided we would do this around her birthday, end of January. Around October of 2019, my dad told me he had started seeing someone new. I was shocked. It had been less than a year since my mom had passed. My parents had been together for over 40 years and were the happiest couple I had ever met in my life. My dad was an absolute wreck after her death and told me more than once he would rather commit S than be without her. I spoke to my therapist, and I was able to understand that something that made my dad happy was a good thing. I realize she is not replacing my mother. I have met this new woman, and she is perfectly nice and has been nothing but kind and welcoming to me. It's been hard to deal with, though, as I think I am further behind than my dad in the grieving process. My dad texted me last week and told me he had made plans to go up to our cottage in the next few weeks to spread my mom's ashes. This is a huge moment, as it feels like the last step in saying goodbye to her. Myself, my sister, my nephews, and my dad are all going. He just texted me now to tell me, however, that his new girlfriend will be coming as well, and I am distraught. On one hand, I completely understand why he would want her there, as she has been supportive of him and he genuinely seems to find happiness with her. She has become a big part of his life, even though I feel it has been quite a quick-moving relationship. Deep down, though, I don't want her there. She is essentially a stranger to me, and I am already reeling a bit from seeing my dad act affectionately towards someone who is not my mom. I just feel very uncomfortable trying to celebrate my mom and say goodbye in the presence of someone who has taken her spot, although I rationally know that's not the case, and didn't know my mom at all. I literally gave up my entire life to come back and be there for my dad when he needed it. So I almost feel like this is not an unreasonable ask of him. I have a hard time talking about this kind of stuff with my dad. Am I being unreasonable? How should I approach this in order to be as kind and understanding as possible, while still being clear on my needs? As a daughter whose dad got a girlfriend a mere 3 months after my mom died, I was livid, and I told him so. I felt he was being disrespectful to her memory, and I told him so. When he wanted me to meet her, I told him not until I was ready, and it didn't happen for another year. My point being, let him know how you feel, and then just get over it. He's gonna do what he's gonna do. I think it's perfectly valid to tell your dad that her presence would cause you pain at this particular event. Ultimately, you don't have control over what he does, how he grieves, or how quickly he moves on, but you should have the space in your relationship to make your feelings known. Yeah, you can see his having a new girlfriend as him being happy and a great thing. But you can also feel grief for the fact that your mother has lost her very life while her husband moves on. At least open the conversation with him and see what he has to say about it. He may tell you that he's still grieving terribly and that she provides him support that he can't ask from you, his children. He may say he understands and change his mind about bringing her. Either way, it's better to be open about it. My wife and I have been together for 5 years. My stepson, 12, had been battling illness for almost his entire life and recently lost his fight. I loved him from the moment I met him, and it feels like my world is falling apart. With the costs of the last few months of his life adding up, I had taken on more hours at work to provide for his needs, as well as pay for therapy for both my wife and I, to learn how to remain a unit and support each other during this time, as well as individually. My stepson's biological father didn't often see his son, nor does he generally get along with my wife, mostly just coming whenever he felt like it and taking him out for a few hours. I disagreed with this, but my stepson loved his father, and it wasn't my place to try to separate them, so I did my best to just be a good parental figure to him as well. He attended the service and seemed heartbroken. My wife spent a lot of the service with him, and they consoled each other, which I do understand the shared connection as parents, but it hurt as I'm also struggling greatly and felt like a parent to him as well. I had planned to discuss it with her after the dust cleared, because I wasn't going to prioritize my feelings at such a time. That chance never came, because a few days after the service, My wife had told me her ex wanted to meet up with her to discuss their son's belongings, photo albums, etc. Naturally, I had no problem with that, as I had already kept the things that were sentimental to me. Long story short, my wife came back in tears and confessed that while at his place, they slept together, and it wasn't planned, and begged forgiveness. I already know I have to leave. My mental health is hanging on by a thread, and the loss of both a child I considered a son and a betrayal by the only person I had to lean on is too much. But I also know that grief makes people do stupid things, and everyone handles things their own way. If I'm in this much pain, I don't know how she copes with how much pain she's in. I know she didn't intend to hurt me, and that she's a good person who was hurting and looking for comfort. So while I know myself enough to know for my own sanity, I can't stay in this marriage. I love her enough to want to be a friend and continue to support her emotionally. My question is, people who have left their spouses, especially during difficult times, and remain friends, how did you do it? What steps did you take to end the romantic relationship with no bad blood and transition into a different type of relationship with them? She's extremely vulnerable and feels completely alone. How do I leave someone in that position and tell them I want a divorce while still making it clear I care for them and am willing to be a friend in their time of need? Lastly, if any of you have ever lost a child, how did you start to heal? What OP's wife did was an absolute betrayal. There's no doubt about that. OP, I am deeply sorry for the tragic loss of both your son and your marriage. That said, I'm disappointed by the amount of what I believe to be unconstructive comments so far, and question the degree of life experiences of those respondees. I have never cheated in a relationship, including my 18-year relationship with my husband, despite us going through some very challenging times, including a parent's death, my chronic illness, inability to have children, etc. However, I can imagine, although not condone, how it could occur in this case. One respondee crudely says, "Grief didn't make her pee wet." An increased desire to have S is actually a common response to death, as many consider it life-affirming. If anyone wants more information about this, it can easily be found via a Google search. Yes, of course this S should have been with OP, but I can imagine how OP's wife would choose to seek comfort from the body of the only other person on earth who created her son's life. I can imagine how she might feel a sudden affectionate intimacy with that body and a desire for closeness. Obviously, I don't know that that's how she actually felt, and again, I don't condone it regardless. But I think it's a reasonable assumption that there are much more complex motivations involved than a wet pee and being a crappy person. The, in my opinion, staggering claim has also been made that grief doesn't make you do stupid things. If we're going to be pedantic, I agree it doesn't make people do stupid things, but people often make stupid decisions as a result. I assume most of us have known grieving people who engaged in self-destructive behaviors while grieving, such as turning to alcohol or other drugs to numb the pain, lashing out at loved ones, etc. It would be great if grief makes you lean on the person you love, but that's not always the case. There is no standard prescribed reaction to which everyone subscribes. Life isn't that simple, not that black and white.